Thanks for coming, everybody. Can you hear me back there? Yes? Great. I scooched all the chairs forward. You didn't know that, but I did, even before you came in. All right. Well, thank you to Sister Diane, and thank you to my good friend Jessica, and thank you all for coming today. I know it's really nice out there, so we won't be terribly long, but this, to me, is just good fun, because I get to share with you everything that I've been learning about Gen Z, and it really started, about 3 years ago when I was contemplating what would I do my dissertation on, and I was also thinking about what in the world was happening in my classrooms. I thought something has shifted. These students aren't quite like the ones that I began teaching in 2008, and I also looked around my own house where I had one millennial and two Gen Zs, and I said, well, now they're a little different too. I mean, I know all kids are different, but there were some distinctions that I really got curious about. And so that led me on this journey of learning more about Gen Z, and specifically, I was interested in leadership communication and employee engagement. We're not going to talk too much about that today, although I do have a couple charts from my dissertation that I included for you, and you're going to have a little work to do here in a minute as well. So when we think about why we are here, there's sort of a bigger question of why should we even study generations? What can be gained? So this is the interactivity part. What do you think? Why should we do this? What's to be gained? Understanding? Good. Good. What else? Yeah. Acceptance? I like that. Joanne? Less judgmental. Yeah. Absolutely. Knowing how to communicate. Absolutely. Knowing how to be collaborative. Sort of taking a walk in someone else's shoes, and hopefully you will feel like you have taken a good walk in Gen Z shoes after we have a chance to go through some of this. So one of the reasons that we look at generations is because we think about core values, beliefs, and attitudes. That was reflected in some of what you all said. So if we can understand what are some of those influences, and the time of your birth is greatly impacted by things that happen, whether it's world events or it's cultural events or it's cultural issues, and that really spans the generation's life, and as well as the preferences that they might have, and preferences around intrinsic versus extrinsic rewards. We can see some differences in Gen Z that we'll talk a little bit, as well as expectations about work, and not just paid work, but maybe even classroom work or volunteer work. So let's get into it. So first, you might ask, who is Gen Z? And I had a really good question over here. How do we know when one generation starts and another one ends? And so the answer is, well, we really don't until we're a good distance from it. So right now, some folks say 1995, and later, when I was doing my dissertation, I looked at two groups of researchers who were pretty active in the Gen Z space, and so they had picked 1995 as the beginning. Others say 1997. Some even stretch it out as far as 2000, but for the purposes of today, we'll say 1995 and present. So we're thinking in terms of kids and teens, and really about the oldest of them are now 24 and just getting their feet wet in the workforce. They are as large a number as millennials, if not larger. So right now, millennials are the largest group. 35% of the workforce is comprised of millennials, but as Gen Z starts to matriculate in, we'll start to see that shift over. And if you think about what Gen Z has seen, they have come of age during a time when the United States has always been at war, when gun violence and active shooter drills are part of their everyday existence at school. And they've also always lived in a post-recession economy. So these types of events have absolutely influenced their worldview, and I think will continue to shape this generation. They are often described as matter-of-fact, sensible, and hard-headed. And I can tell you that absolutely describes my youngest child. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there. All right. So if we think about generations as a concrete group, they have a social bond among the people who make that generation. They share experiences, they have these lasting impressions, and they use these for creating context. So I thought it might be fun to take a look at the next chart and really think about some of those notable occurrences that have spanned each generation. So we start with the greatest generation. If you look at this chart, if you're 74 and still in the workforce, you would be among 5 generations of individuals who are potentially still working and in the workforce. So 5 generations. So when you think about that from a management standpoint or from a leadership standpoint, you really have to think about all of those experiences coalescing in your workplace. So let's take a few minutes, just turn to somebody next to you, get the chart out, and see if you can come up with some of the notable occurrences. Maybe it's for your generation, or maybe for a different generation. So we'll take like 2 minutes. All right, go. All right. This is a good group. This is generally where I lose control of the class, so we'll see if we can bring it back in. All right, what do you think? What are some of the notable occurrences that define these generations? Who wants to go? Do we have any for the greatest generation? World War II, good. Great Depression, absolutely, absolutely. Left an indelible mark on that generation and how they thought about work and money and family. Good. How about the baby boomers? Any baby boomers in here? Okay, good. Love it. Okay, what was notable about that generation? Notable occurrences. Pardon? Vietnam War. What else? Kennedy assassination, absolutely.
Civil rights.
Civil rights, love it. Pardon? Cold War. Sexual revolution. Woodstock. Good, 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 good. All right. Yeah, yeah. The greatest expansion through the 50s, right? Car, a house, couple kids. Good. All right, how about Gen X? AIDS. What else? Latchkey kids, absolutely. Pardon? Challenger, yeah, absolutely. Family instability. A lot of counterculture. We were also analog, so we were, the first to see the computer come to the workplace. I clearly remember when we got a computer at my first job, I was like, what? But we all had to share it, right? Huh? What is that? All right, and then Gen Y, millennials. 9/11. What else? Cell phones. The rise of the internet. The dial-up internet. Remember that AOL sound? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then Gen Z. We'll talk a lot more. School shootings, cyberbullying, the dot-com bubble bust, right?
2008.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Post-recession. So these are just some of what we saw throughout the generations, and I know for me, I certainly experienced many of those things. And I think they did leave an indelible mark. So I thought this was an interesting slide to include as well, and I gave you a copy of it because I feel like this could be some of the real key takeaways from this talk, that as leadership, we need to really think about what values do different generations come to the workplace with, what sort of leadership style do they prefer, and then what sort of communication styles, because we have to speak across multiple generations. And I thought it was so interesting for Gen Z, they want rapport, so they very much believe that their boss could be their friend, or that they should be able to just text me when they're studying a question that they might have for the midterm. True story, got 2 of those yesterday. They want efficiency, they want technology, and they get very impatient when they don't see those as part of their current reality. And then I thought some of the others were really interesting. Anything on this list surprise you, resonate with you? I think it's so interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about the differences between millennials and Gen Z, but millennials were very collective, they were very group-oriented, and Gen Z tends to be more entrepreneurial and more independent. Yeah?
On the communication styles, is that in response to previous generations' communication with them, or is that something that they just learned?
That's just basically what they have stated as their communication preferences. So if you are leading me and I am Gen X, I want truth, give it to me straight, and I want it to be clear. Don't give me this fuzzy logic. Tell me how it's going to be. Yeah. Okay, good. Anything else? Yeah.
Now, I can understand those lines for X, Y.
Mm-hmm.
But how are those decisions being made, pulled together for Gen Z, since they are not,
Yeah.
for the most part, most of them
Yeah.
aren't even close to being adults?
Yeah. No, it's very early, very early.
So the bottom line could change.
They could change, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. Yes, absolutely. Good, good. Yeah, very early. We're very early in the generation, for sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I think how the occurrences go with the communication and leadership
Mm-hmm.
style
Yeah.
really is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's my next paper. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay, good. Good. Yes.
It's also interesting to me that even though Gen Z is independent and autonomous,
Yes.
they want rapport.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's community is important for them,
Yes.
but not necessarily in the way
Yes.
maybe where you
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's great. Yep. Yep. Great. So a good comment in the back row about, how can we know that this is really how Gen Z is or will be? What's interesting, some researchers suggest that Gen Z may be the last true generation, that we might not have these 15-year spans of generations any longer because technology and culture is changing so quickly that we may have what they call new microwave generations, that these are going to be generations within a generation. And it's going to be less about what difference a generation makes, but more about what difference a day makes, which, wow. So we'll have overlapping pieces of culture and events that will shape permutations, really, of Gen Z and future generations. So hold on to your hats. I don't know how I'll be able to give this talk in another 10 years, right? So here are some differences between millennials and Gen Z. And it was so interesting when I first started my research and I told people what I was working on, they said, well, aren't Gen Zs just millennials? Aren't they just millennials? You're just making this up. And it's no, actually no. They are different, and it's interesting. I started to pull material from all different places to try to put this together. And I thought it was so interesting when I finally got it done. Because you think about tech savvy, millennials, any millennials in here? Okay, so you're pretty tech savvy, right? You know your way around a computer or a smartphone. So Gen Z, yeah, Andy's like, "Meow." So Gen Z is really technology savants. They can not only learn the technology, they can also change the technology and create new things with the technology. Or if they don't like the technology they have, well, there's an app for that. I'll figure that out, right? And then other things, millennials like to share everything. They're much more interested in sharing what they're working on or sharing what they're doing. Gen Z, not so much. They've seen a few too many hashtag fails and other embarrassing things online, so they are more likely to share judiciously, and they will turn their geolocations off. So it's interesting, in my own household, I say, put your locations on. I want to be able to know where you're at. Why, Mom? All right, I'll turn it on just for this, but then I'm turning it back off. That's what my Gen Zers say, because I don't want all my friends to be able to track me. Interesting. Millennials, we called them, or some of the literature calls them slackivists. Now, I think that's a little mean. Gen Z activists. So millennials like to talk about what should be done and talk about who should be volunteering. Gen Z is more likely to take action and to actually do the work that needs to be done. Millennials like to text. Gen Z likes to communicate with images. We'll talk a little bit more about that one. I thought this was interesting. Millennials like to share stuff. Gen Z likes to make stuff. Very much maker-oriented. Millennials optimistic. Gen Z realistic. Millennials oftentimes, it has been said, I'm not saying it applies to any millennial in this room, but very much just want success to come to them. Well, I'm here, I've been here 6 months, why am I not promoted, right? Where Gen Z is a little more apt to be willing to work for the success. We'll talk a little more about what that means. Gen Z is also called the, oh, I'm sorry, you had a question. Let's hear it. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like the generation of the time on challenge and
Yeah.
doing stupid things on vines, and so I'm just curious how that came about.
Yeah, I think Gen Z has been described as mature beyond their years. I think in part because, you think about the young girl who got behind climate change and was willing to go to the UN and talk about, so I think that in some ways they're mature, certainly not in all ways. I would agree with you. Yes, good. Any other questions? All right. So let's take a look at this idea that they are the sober generation, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. So they're optimistic, they're driven, but they're also very pragmatic, and they're aware of circumstances beyond their control. 43% say they're optimistic about their own futures, but they're far less optimistic about things like world events, government, leadership. They drink less than previous generations. How about that one? They, in part, suggest that this less drinking has come because of an increase in health issues, an increased focus on health, and they also favor marijuana over booze. So there you have it. Drinking, smoking, drug use, and teen pregnancy are at their lowest point in decades. Yeah. They're also savers, not spenders, which some suggest could be a reflection of growing up in a post-9/11, post-economic recession world. 58% of teens 13 to 17 say they're already saving. So I thought that was interesting. Now here is a Gen Z describing his experience.
Hi, I'm Joshua Burha. I was around 11 years old at the time, and I remember my mom losing her job. She got laid off, so we cut expenses. My parents had to pull me out of a private school. It was a very dramatic time.
So in addition to being pragmatic, cautious, slightly more sober, they're also growing up in non-traditional family structures. So 28% of Gen Zers are living in multi-generational homes. And instead of rebelling from their parents, they see their parents and their parents' friends as allies. 58% of teens say parents are their best friends. How about that one? And parents agreed. 40% say they are much closer to their kids than they were to their own parents. And I think that's true in our house. I mean, my youngest, the Gen Z, we share clothes. We call them shareables. If it's on the shareable list, we can both wear it. And she's fine with that, She's like, yeah, come hang out with me, Mom. I know, it's tragic, right? Sometimes she's like, take it off, Mom, take it off. Gen Z is also influenced by the conservative values of their grandparents. How about that one? We've heard they're technology savants. I think it's interesting, they're also called the on-demand generation. So they have abandoned TV. How many of the Gen Zs in here watch TV? Okay, one. Okay, good. They've cut the cable, right? Who needs Gen Z? They'd much rather watch whatever they want to watch on their laptop or mobile. They can, did you have a question? No, okay. They can multitask across 5 screens at once. This just kills me. Gen Zers, do you do it, huh? You got your computer up, you might have, a cell phone up, you might have, somebody else is showing you something on YouTube. Yeah, 5 screens at once. They have an 8-second attention span. Yeah, and therefore, they really gravitate toward those 10-second or less video advertising in apps like Snapchat. Gen Zers, are you on Snapchat? How many of you are on Snapchat? Yeah, okay. And they use social media as a research tool. I thought this was great. 52% of teens use YouTube or other social media sites for a typical school research assignment. How many times have you just said, I'm going to YouTube that, right? Right? Yeah, it's now a verb. Good. So with all this technology, they also speak, yeah. Yep.
Do you think some of this is just like every
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's because the times have changed, not necessarily just because of the generations.
Well, I think you might use YouTube to learn things, but you also use other sources, right? You might say, okay, she's an anomaly, everyone ignore her. Well, no, I agree, there are technology changes and shifts that will create new behaviors across generations, so absolutely, yeah.
And also just be considered a matter of convenience.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you guys like efficiency, and it's more efficient, right? Why shouldn't you? Why shouldn't you let somebody explain it to you on YouTube than read that whole article? Are you kidding? It's even more efficient, right? Absolutely. All right, so again, generational research, we most definitely have to create some generalities that may or may not apply to everyone in the generation. So that's my caveat. All right, so they're described as that on-demand, the 8-second attention span, and certainly they also use social media as a research tool. They like their emoticons and their emojis. They want to communicate quickly. And they like to comment. They expect connectivity. They get impatient when not everyone is on the same technology playing field. What's interesting is this incessant ping of social media or of communication creates such a demand on their attention that some describe it like a never-ending emotional investment, that they constantly have to sort of put something out there or worry about what they are putting out there. And it can also create some unrealistic expectations for what the world should look like, which is probably why Gen Z reports higher levels of anxiety and depression as teens and young adults than earlier generations. 1 in 8 college freshmen was described as being depressed, and it's the highest level that researchers have seen since they began collecting the data 3 decades ago. And some suggest that social media could be partly to blame. So let's take a look at this.
How many of you would say stress is a big problem in your lives? What about social media? How big of a part of your lives is social media?
I love social media.
Do any of you ever question your body because of what you see on social media?
I've been so focused on just like not eating past 7 and drinking water. Like on Instagram, like I follow people like Kendall Jenner and Kylie Jenner, and they all have this like time measure, like body image that everyone is expecting from this generation. So like I have a lot of self-confidence. Like I don't hate my body, but I always feel that there's room for improvement all the time.
There's no question that social media has a lot of positives, but the problem is we're measuring our self-worth by how many people like what we're posting. There was a time where if someone insulted us growing up, it was to our face. Now, those hurtful commentary lives online.
Do any of you ever feel criticized and hurt by things that are said on social media?
Yes.
What kinds of things might somebody say that's mean?
They could talk about things that you post, things that you wear, things that you say. I've seen a lot of bullying happen on Snapchat, to be exact, with some of my friends, some people calling them fat, even me, talking about body image.
The honesty about their insecurities tough for Kayla's mom, who's about to share her experience with the group.
A lot of my friends think that I'm anorexic because I'm really skinny for my age, and sometimes it can hurt, but gotta grow tough skin.
I used to get bullied in middle school and elementary school because I had a unibrow, I wasn't the skinniest girl.
All right. The good news, Gen Z is very entrepreneurial, very hardworking. They're career focused. They're ready to work hard. They want to think for themselves. They want to pursue new opportunities. They've been surrounded by what they call DIY education, i.e., let me just YouTube it, and crowdsourcing. Let me see if somebody else knows how to do it. Maybe they can share that with me. They dream of self-employment. 61% of high school students say they want to be an entrepreneur. 73% want colleges to offer careers in founding and running, or courses in founding and running a business. 70% of teens are working entrepreneurial jobs, like teaching tennis lessons or selling items on eBay. And I can tell you my Gen Z teaches tennis lessons, and a good friend of hers resells tennis shoes on all sorts of different platforms. He makes just a gob of money. It's crazy. They believe in diversity, equality, non-discrimination, the alleviation of poverty. They're ethnically diverse. They're likely to be the last true Caucasian majority in this country. They've never lived at a time when either gender or any racial background was either president or running for president. Interesting. They don't see why same-sex marriage would be controversial. For them, racial, sexual, gender equality isn't just an ideal, but a reality. They've seen it. They spend more time with computers, up to 3 hours per day, for non-homework related purposes. That's a lot of time. They suffer from FOMO, fear of missing out. And being culturally connected is cultural. That's part of their DNA. 26% said they would need to fly to visit most of their social network friends. I thought this was interesting as well. For Gen Z, there is no such thing as an appointment. They don't get why you should have to have an appointment. Is that right, Jess, sometimes? Yeah. Because every moment is prime for interaction. And digital detox might become their new yoga. Many Gen Z say that they're thinking about breaking from social media or taking a break from social media. They even call it a digital detox. So we'll listen.
My name is Karina Delgado. I am 19. Social media had too much control over me. It wasn't really good for my self-esteem. I was already a young, developing prepubescent girl. I had enough insecurities as it was, but I also, in my friend groups, Snapchat, whatever, everything was like, can we get a good picture of this? And it didn't feel very authentic what we were doing if it was always just to make it presentable for others. I didn't feel like I was really living in the moment. And since I've quit it, I've totally seen the difference of being in the moment, and I feel so much more present when I'm at the dinner table. I'm not looking at my phone, or I'm out with friends and I'm not trying to take pictures. I'm just seeing things.
So they live in the moment, they have an eye on the future, they expect to have multiple careers before 30. They're drawn to perpetual reinvention. And they are experts in the obscure, they carefully cultivate their digital personas, yet they really desire privacy. And the worldview they have is we-focused, not me-focused. I thought that was interesting. They have an extended web of real-life connections and relationships, and they call it net weaving. And they really believe that they can net weave their way to the next opportunity, and that's what will enable them to have these multiple careers. They intend to change the world, which I think is great. They are more altruistic and outgoing in many respects than millennials. They're hyper aware of what's happening to the planet. They are very interested in social issues, including climate change, gun violence, world hunger, and showing concern for others. 60% say they want to change the world for the better. Now, I thought it was interesting when it comes to college, they really resonate with some of the things that we do best: hands-on learning, real-world experience, professional opportunity, small class sizes, personal connections. When they are looking for colleges, some of the things, 50% of them first consider finances. then programs and majors, employability, flexibility, and hands-on learning. Here's sort of a fun piece where lots of Gen Zers talk about their experience.
Generation Z is a generation of free thinkers.
The generation after the millennials, like mid-1990s to early 2000s.
Very accepting.
Tech savvy.
Technologically advanced and socially inept.
Instant gratification, connected to social media.
We do share a gross amount of information online.
It feels so self-absorbed to be like, everyone needs to know what's going on with me.
I mean, today's generation, they're like full-time brand managers, personal life and professional life.
Twitter, I feel like it's much more instantaneous.
I feel like Facebook is full of stories that are like paragraphs and essays that I hate reading.
We're all on our phones. Like, we're with each other, but we're not with each other because we're on social media.
My mom doesn't like Snapchat or any of those social media sources. She'd much rather talk on the phone or talk to someone face to face, where now I feel like a lot of people our generation are uncomfortable with that.
My parents were very traditional. They kind of question, like, when I go to interviews, why do you dress like so casually? We want to dress like we're very approachable. We want to be liked. We are not judged by our professions anymore. My parents' generation, they would move up through their talent, and our generation is more about the networking, the people you know, how your platform is.
Because we have grown up with a black president and with gay rights now being a constitutional right, we now see that as a normal.
I can think of plenty of things in the future that make me worried. Like our president. He got elected based off of the premise that we can ignore facts.
We do recognize the fact that the environment is being abused.
I think that climate change is a huge problem and we need to be more sustainable with everything that we do in this world. I want to be part of that movement too, to like help bring about a change of protecting the environment better.
We're learning to like move our boundaries, like just to branch out and like talk to more people and be more involved with the world as a whole.
I'm optimistic that we're moving towards being a more accepting society in general.
All right, so some of what I take away from that is there's great hope, and Gen Z really is here to take on the world. I think we've heard that their cognitive processes have adapted, and so should we. I think the importance of tailoring the message is very significant with Gen Z, and to establish a communication frequency that works for both parties and really create with a variety of communication tools. And that they're certainly different than millennials. They're in sync with much of what we have to offer. I think their learning paths are less defined, less traditional, and they do desire to learn in new ways. 72% of teens say colleges should let students design their own courses or their own major. 63% want colleges to offer courses in founding or running a business. So what can we learn? What can we think about for faculty and staff? I think obviously leveraging technology, fostering volunteerism, I think we heard that, infusing social impact into what we do, into our courses, into our extracurricular offerings, hands-on learning, innovation, entrepreneurship, internships, study abroad, and really creating those personal connections. All right, questions? Let's have it. What do you think? Gen Z, how'd I do? Did it resonate? Did it feel right? Good? I got a thumbs up here. What do you think? Thumbs up? Just text me. It's okay. Just give me a smiley face. No words are needed. It's okay. Good. Let's have it.
I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to this pressure that seems to be building on Gen Z folks
Yeah.
self-made brand.
Yeah.
It seems to me, as someone who's looking at that, incredibly stressful. I mean, it's exciting, but stressful, and I'm just wondering how that is shaping, because I picture that leading to burnout by the time that folks are like
Yeah.
19.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think we're seeing that. I didn't talk too much about it, but certainly Instagram. How many are on Instagram? Okay, good. So you might have an Instagram, but you also might have a Finsta. Does anybody have a Finsta? Okay, all right. So that's your fake Instagram, or that's your Instagram that you only let certain people see, because it's absolutely exhausting to keep up your main brand. So sometimes you just want to be incredibly authentic. And then on Snapchat, the uglier the picture, the better, right? No? Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. But if you're going to create a story, it's going to be good, right? And you carefully curate the Snapchat story, because that's the one that sticks around. So it is. It's incredible pressure. I do think we're going to see digital detox is the new yoga, that Gen Z will take breaks from social media and just literally put it down. Yeah.
I see with that a little bit. I just found it interesting. There's more mentorship in this group.
Yeah.
And even what you're speaking to with the branding
Yeah.
in my own house.
Uh-huh.
I see the same thing. The older one is taking the younger one. This is how you do things.
Yep.
So it's a lot more individualized mentorship as
Yeah.
opposed to, I see
Yeah.
it in the classroom.
Uh-huh.
Like, they do not like big groups.
Right.
So if you can keep it to 2 or 3,
Yep.
they will talk and interact.
Yep. I think that's right. Good. What else? Yes.
I feel what's missing is the spiritual life of
Yeah.
the gym.
Yeah.
Where are they?
Yeah. You know what? I couldn't find much on that. We know millennials, Dr. Madden sent me an interesting article on millennials, and more millennial females are looking, perhaps to join an order and dedicate their lives to the spiritual. There's not much on Gen Z. What I did found interesting is that they are taking their cues from their grandparents and some of their values from their grandparents. So it will be interesting to see if they do adopt some of the same spiritual values of their grandparents.
One of the things I've discovered is that young people have a spiritual life, but they don't go to any church.
Well, and that's true. Some research, especially with millennials, say that millennials are getting more spiritual but less likely to go to church. Yeah. Yeah.
And the minimal reading I found says that Gen Z would say spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
But now that I know this, the connection with grandparents' values, they flirt more with organized religion.
Yeah.
So they'll put their toe in the water,
Mm-hmm.
and if it's something that fits their values,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
they want to be stretched.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's finding how to
Right. Right. And I think things like social impact and volunteerism and really the community service component, I think would very much resonate with Gen Z. The immersion, the service immersion projects. Yeah.
I was just going to say that I think a lot of this has to do with that concept of them being digital natives.
Mm-hmm.
We want to be multi-generations over the course of 15 years any longer. People are on the cusp of that cutoff.
Yeah.
Activity.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really feel like you fit in either lane
Right.
because
Yes.
of where technology hit
Yeah.
in your generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we'll see in Gen Z.
Yeah.
I think as they are more in college, like their entire college population now, and because they're emerging into the workforce, I see a rebellion as
Yeah.
digital natives too. They've lived enough through
Mm-hmm.
the negativity on social media
Yes.
that they don't want to participate.
Right.
So in some
Mm-hmm.
ways, I wonder if Gen Z will have a healthier relationship
Yeah.
with technology than millennials and those of us that are now parenting
Mm-hmm.
millennials because of,
Yeah.
it's not a novelty any longer.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
In my own house, or my
Yes. Yes.
A novelty in a way to us.
Mhm.
It's like part of her, which makes her able to kind of take control of it a little bit
Mhm.
more. But this idea of the duality of
Mhm.
what I show to the world and what
Yeah.
I show to my close friends
Yeah.
is very real.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was great having this opportunity. Thank you.